I've always believed that trust is the foundation of any strong marriage. And for years, my wife, Emily, and I had built what I thought was an unshakable relationship. She's the kind of woman who lights up a room, effortlessly social, warm, and full of energy. She had more friends than I could count, and I never felt the need to question her loyalty. When she told me she was going on a ski trip with her friends, I didn't hesitate to encourage her. She deserved it. The night before she left, we had dinner at our favorite restaurant. Everything was normal, at least I thought so at the time. She talked about how excited she was to finally get away, how much she needed a break from work. I nodded along, happy to see her happy. But there was something in her eyes, something flickering beneath the surface. Nervousness? Guilt? I dismissed the thought. Why would she have anything to feel guilty about? Emily left early the next morning. I kissed her goodbye, watched her throw her suitcase into the trunk of her friend Olivia's car, and waved as they disappeared down the street. I told myself I'd miss her, but the truth is, I was looking forward to a quiet house for a few days. Just me, the couch, and some much-needed relaxation. The first 2 days were uneventful. I went to work, came home, watched TV, and scrolled, mindlessly through my phone. Emily sent me occasional texts, nothing out of the ordinary. Just got to the hotel, the view is insane. Or, went skiing today, my legs are dead. Everything seemed fine. Then came the first moment that made me pause. It was the third night. I was getting ready for bed when I realized that Emily hadn't called or texted all day. That wasn't like her. Even when she was busy, she'd send a quick love you or something simple. I picked up my phone and sent her a message. Me. Hey, hope you're having fun. Miss you. Call me if you're still up. No response. I waited an hour, scrolling through social media. Then another. Midnight came and went. I texted her again. Me. Everything okay? Still nothing. My stomach twisted. I tried calling her. Straight to voicemail. I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe she lost service. Maybe she had one too many drinks and crashed early. But then, just as I was about to put my phone down, a notification popped up. A message from Emily. Relief washed over me until I opened it. Emily. Hey, sorry, long day, going to bed now. Love you. It should have reassured me, but something was off. First, Emily never called me hey. She always started with babe, or something playful. And the way it was written, it was too formal, too distant. I read it again, feeling my pulse quicken. What if she didn't write this? The next morning, I checked my phone first thing. No new messages. I hesitated, then called Olivia instead. She picked up after 2 rings. Hey, what's up? Is Emily with you? I asked, keeping my voice light. A pause. Yeah, she's here. I frowned. Something about her tone felt rehearsed. Can I talk to her? Another pause. She's in the shower. I glanced at the clock. At 7 in the morning? Yeah, she wanted to wake up early. Olivia let out a forced laugh. You know how she is, but I did know how she was. And Emily would never voluntarily wake up early, especially on vacation. I didn't push it. Instead, I just said, tell her to call me when she's done. Of course, Olivia said too quickly. But Emily never called. Later that day, I was scrolling through TikTok during my lunch break when I saw a video that made my stomach drop. It was a random travel vlog, someone showing off their ski trip at a resort. I recognized the place immediately. It was the same hotel Emily was staying at. The video started off with shots of the slopes, the après-ski bar, people laughing and drinking. Then about halfway through, the camera panned over the hotel's spa area, and that's when I saw her. My wife. She was in the background near the pool, and she wasn't alone. A man had his arms around her, his face partially obscured, but her face was unmistakable. She was leaning into him, close, intimate. My breath caught in my throat. My mind scrambled for an explanation. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just the angle. But no matter how I tried to rationalize it, my gut told me otherwise. My fingers tightened around my phone as I replayed the clip, again and again, searching for a detail that would prove me wrong. I immediately called Olivia. She picked up almost instantly. "Hey, where's Emily?" I asked, my voice carefully neutral. "She's here," Olivia said without missing a beat. "We're just hanging out in the room." I felt my pulse quicken. "That's funny," I said, keeping my tone light, "because I just saw a video of her at the hotel pool, with some guy." A pause. Too long. Then Olivia let out a nervous laugh. "What? No way. You must be mistaken." "Olivia," I said, my patience thinning, "don't lie to me." She hesitated. Then, without another word, she hung up. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. "Emily," I answered immediately. "What the hell is going on?" She sighed. "I have no idea what you're talking about. I saw you, Emily, in the video, with another guy." A beat of silence, then she let out a frustrated noise. "Are you serious right now? You're stalking me on TikTok? Jesus, you need to trust me." "Then tell me the truth." "There's nothing to tell," she snapped. "You're being paranoid." The way she said it, like I was crazy for even suggesting it, made me second-guess myself. Was I overreacting? Was it really nothing? But that feeling in my gut, the one that had started as a whisper, was now screaming at me that something was very, very wrong. Then, just as I was about to say something else, Emily's voice softened. "I love you. Okay? You have to trust me." For a moment I almost did, until I heard something in the background, a man's voice, a low, muffled laugh. And then, before I could process it, the call disconnected. I stared at my phone, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. The call had ended too abruptly, and that voice in the background, deep, masculine, too close to be a passing guest at the hotel. I tried calling Emily back, straight to voicemail. I sat there for a moment, gripping my phone so tightly, my knuckles turned white. My rational side told me to calm down, to wait for her to explain. But another part of me, the part that had been nagging me ever since she left, knew something wasn't right. I opened TikTok again and found the video. I paused at the exact moment she appeared. Zoomed in. The man's arm was wrapped around her waist, his hand resting low on her hip, fingers grazing her skin like he had every right to touch her. I felt sick. I had to do something. That night I barely slept. I kept staring at my phone, waiting for a message, an excuse. Anything. But Emily didn't call. The next morning I tried texting her again. "Me. We need to talk. Call me." Nothing. I called Olivia instead. She didn't pick up either. I had officially crossed into dangerous territory. The kind where doubt becomes paranoia, where paranoia breeds obsession. I couldn't focus at work. I couldn't think about anything else. I had to know the truth. And then, almost by accident, I stumbled upon something I wasn't supposed to see. I was back on TikTok, scrolling mindlessly, half hoping for another accidental clue. And then I saw it. Another video from the same hotel, posted just a few hours ago. This one was different. It was a wide shot of the ski slopes, a group of people getting ready to go down. I wouldn't have paid it any attention, except for the small detail in the background. Emily. She wasn't skiing. She was standing off to the side, wearing a thick coat and sunglasses, talking to someone, the same man from the pool. And this time, they weren't just standing close. He was touching her face, brushing something off her cheek, intimate, familiar, and then, in a single horrifying moment, she did something I never thought I'd see. She laughed. And then, she kissed him. A quick kiss, barely noticeable if you weren't looking for it. But I was looking. The air left my lungs. I sat frozen, staring at the screen, my world collapsing in on itself. I didn't remember making the decision to drive, but suddenly I was in my car, heading toward the mountains. The resort was about a 4-hour drive. I didn't think. I didn't second-guess myself. I just kept going, fueled by something primal, something burning inside me that wouldn't let me sit still anymore. As I drove, my mind raced. What was I going to do? Storm into the hotel? Demand answers? Would she even admit it? Part of me hoped, prayed, that there was some explanation, that maybe I had misinterpreted everything, that she would see me, run into my arms, and laugh at how ridiculous I had been. But deep down, I already knew the truth, and I wasn't ready for it. I arrived at the resort just before sunset. The air was cold, crisp, biting against my skin as I stepped out of the car. I didn't go inside right away. Instead, I stood in the parking lot, staring at the massive, luxurious hotel perched against the snowy mountains. Emily was in there. With him. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to breathe. Then I walked inside. The lobby was warm, filled with the sound of laughter, the clinking of glasses, the faint scent of pine and burning wood from the massive fireplace. I scanned the room. No sign of her. I made my way to the front desk, my pulse pounding. "Excuse me," I said to the receptionist, keeping my voice steady. "I need to check if a guest is staying here." She gave me a polite but firm smile. "I'm sorry, sir." "But we can't give out guest information," I exhaled sharply. "I understand, but I know she's here." The receptionist hesitated. "Who are you looking for?" I hesitated. Saying Emily's name out loud felt like making it real. "My wife," I finally said. "Emily Carter. She's here with a friend." The woman typed something into her computer, then frowned. "I don't see an Emily Carter checked in." My stomach twisted. "That's not possible," I said. "She's here. I stopped myself. I knew she was here, but maybe she didn't use her real name. I swallowed hard. "What about Olivia Parker?" The receptionist's expression didn't change, but I saw it, the slight flicker in her eyes. "She's here," she admitted. My breath caught. "What room?" "I'm sorry, sir, but I can't—" "Please," I interrupted, leaning in. "I just need to know if my wife is with her." The receptionist hesitated. Then, lowering her voice, she said, "She checked in with a man." A chill ran down my spine. "Not Emily?" I asked. She shook her head. "No Emily Carter on the reservation." For a moment, everything around me faded. Emily wasn't here with Olivia. She was here with him. I left the front desk in a daze, my mind spinning. I needed to find her. Now. I made my way toward the elevators, blending in with a group of guests. Heading up. I didn't have a plan, just the overwhelming need to see her with my own eyes. When I stepped onto the right floor, I had no idea which room was hers. But I didn't have to guess for long, because just as I turned the corner, I saw her Emily. Walking down the hallway, laughing, her hand brushing against his arm, I stopped dead in my tracks. She didn't see me at first. She was too caught up in whatever he was saying, too lost in her own world. And then she looked up, our eyes met, and everything stopped. Her smile froze. Her entire body stiffened. For a second, she looked like she had seen a ghost. Then, the color drained from her face. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. And in that moment, as we stood there in the dimly lit hallway, the truth hung between us like a razor-sharp blade. I wasn't supposed to be here. Wasn't supposed to see this. And the way she looked at me, like I had just destroyed something fragile, told me one undeniable fact. She had been caught. Now I just had to find out what she would do next. For a moment, neither of us moved. The hallway was silent except for the faint hum of the hotel's central heating, but to me it felt like a bomb had just gone off. Emily stood frozen, her lips parted like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Her hand was still on his arm. The man, tall, dark-haired, about my age but sharper somehow, more put together, followed her gaze and turned to look at me. He didn't move his hand away. He didn't step back. He just stared. His expression, unreadable. I had imagined this confrontation 100 times during my drive here. I had planned for anger, for shouting, for demanding answers. But now that I was standing in front of her, my wife, caught red-handed in a hotel hallway with another man, I felt nothing. Empty. She was the first to break. What are you doing here? Her voice was quiet, shaky. I didn't answer. I just looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't dressed for skiing. She wasn't in her usual cozy vacation wear. She was in a black form-fitting dress, her makeup fresh, her hair styled like she was heading to dinner. Not a ski trip, a date. "Who is he?" I finally asked, my voice too calm, too measured. Emily swallowed hard. She pulled her hand back, as if realizing too late how damning it looked. I can explain." I waited. She didn't. The man shifted slightly, exhaling through his nose like this whole situation was an inconvenience. "Maybe we should take this somewhere private," he suggested, voice smooth, completely unfazed. I turned to him. "Who the hell are you?" He held my gaze. "Daniel." That was it. No last name, no apology, no excuse, just Daniel. I laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because this was actually happening. This wasn't some paranoia-fueled nightmare. It was real. Emily took a small step forward, her hands out like she was trying to calm a wild animal. "Listen, let's go inside and talk, okay?" I clenched my jaw. "Inside where?" She hesitated, and that was all the answer I needed. She wasn't staying with Olivia. She was staying with him. I took a step back, running a hand over my face, my body hot despite the cold air creeping through the hallway. "You lied," I said. "The whole time. You lied to my face." Emily's eyes glistened, but I didn't know if it was guilt or panic. "I didn't. Stop." My voice was sharp, harsher than I intended, but I couldn't listen to her pretend. Not now. Daniel sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose like this was exhausting for him. "Look, man," I turned on him so fast, he actually took a step back. "Don't," I warned. "Not a single word." His mouth snapped shut. I looked at Emily again. My wife, the woman I had trusted with everything. I had come here hoping for an explanation, but now that I was standing in front of her, I realized I didn't want one. What explanation could possibly undo this? She had made her choice, and it wasn't me. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. "I drove 4 hours thinking maybe I was crazy. Maybe I misunderstood, maybe—" I cut myself off. "But I wasn't crazy, was I?" Emily's face crumpled. "It's not what you think." I laughed again, but this time it felt sharp in my throat. "It's exactly what I think." She reached for my hand. Reflexively, I pulled away, and that was when she started crying. Big, silent tears that she didn't bother wiping away. The kind that used to break me. Not this time. I turned and started walking. "Wait," she whispered. I didn't stop. "Please," she begged. "Just don't go like this." I reached the elevator and pressed the button. Then I made the mistake of looking back. Her face, pleading, desperate, raw, was one I used to love. Now it just looked unfamiliar. "I trusted you," I said, the words heavy, final. "And you killed that." The elevator doors slid open. I stepped inside, and this time, I didn't look back. But just as the doors were about to close, a hand shot between them, stopping them from sealing shut. I tensed. Not Emily. Daniel. I stared at him, my pulse pounding, expecting him to say something smug, something infuriating. Instead, his expression was completely different. Smugness. Real, deliberate smugness. He stepped inside the elevator, quickly hitting the button for another floor. I took a step back, my muscles coiled, ready for whatever was coming. "What the hell do you want?" I asked. Daniel turned to me, lowering his voice. "I want to help you, man," I frowned. "Help me?" he smirked, leaning against the wall. "Yeah, you're about to go through a messy divorce, right? I mean, look at her." He tilted his head toward the hallway. "Crying. Pathetic. I—" clenched my fists. "Watch your mouth." He raised his hands in mock surrender. "Relax, I'm just saying, you might want to reconsider walking away." I frowned. "What the hell are you talking about?" Daniel exhaled, rubbing his temple. I was going to marry her, you know. I stiffened. He let out a chuckle. Yeah. She didn't tell you that, did she? She made sure I had all the right ideas. Commitment, romance, the future. His smirk widened. And she was very convincing. My stomach twisted. What's your point? Daniel's smile faded. My point is, she doesn't just fall out of love. She needs something else. Stability. Security. He looked at me now, serious. She needs you. I shook my head. Bullshit. She doesn't need anyone. Daniel tilted his head. Then, why do you think she's crying? I clenched my jaw. She was supposed to make me fall in love with her, marry her. And then? His expression darkened. Then we settle finances. She makes sure she gets what she needs, and if she's lucky, she gets a payout. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. You're saying... She's not cheating. On you, man. He leaned in. She's trying to scam me. The elevator reached my floor. The doors opened. I didn't move. Daniel stepped past me, clapping me on the shoulder. Walk away if you want, he said. But if you don't, maybe it's time you and I start playing the same game. Then he walked off, disappearing into the hallway. I stood there staring after him, my mind spinning, because suddenly, walking away didn't feel like the safest option. It felt like a mistake. I stood in the elevator long after the doors had slid. Shut. Daniel's words replaying in my head. She wasn't cheating on me. She was using him, a scam, a long con. It didn't make sense, or maybe it made too much sense. I exhaled, running a hand over my face. My body was still humming with adrenaline, my mind racing. A part of me wanted to ignore Daniel, drive home, and forget this entire nightmare. But another part of me, the part that had loved Emily, the part that still wanted to believe in something between us, couldn't let go just yet. I had to know the truth. I had to see this through. Instead of leaving, I made my way back through the hallways, my heart pounding with every step. Emily was still in the same spot, standing in the hallway, staring blankly at the wall. She looked lost. Not like someone who had just been caught cheating, like someone who had lost everything. When she saw me, she straightened, wiping her face quickly, trying to compose herself. You came back, she whispered. I nodded slowly. Tell me the truth, Emily. She swallowed hard. I don't stop, I cut her off. No more lies, no more pretending. If you want me to listen, if you want me to even consider staying, then tell me everything. For a second, she just stared at me. Then, finally, she let out a shaky breath. Let's go inside, she said. Her hotel room was too nice, too expensive. It wasn't hers. It was his. I stepped inside, glancing around, but Emily didn't offer an explanation. She just sat on the edge of the bed, wringing her hands together like she was trying to hold herself together. She looked up at me. I never slept with him, she said quietly. I crossed my arms. That doesn't make it better. She flinched but didn't argue. Instead, she took a deep breath and said, Daniel is rich, very rich, but he's also arrogant, selfish, the kind of man who thinks he can have whatever he wants. I stayed silent. I met him at a charity event last year, she continued. He was charming, persistent, but I never let it go beyond innocent flirting. I swear to you it was never anything else. But then, her voice caught. Then what? She looked down. Then I found out what he does. Something in her voice changed. I frowned. Which is? She hesitated, then exhaled. He manipulates women, wealthy women. He finds them, charms them, gets them to trust him, and then he takes them for everything. They have. He's done it for years, but he's careful. He always makes it seem like they were the ones who ruined things, like they were unstable, like they were the problem. My pulse quickened. So what? You wanted to turn the tables on him? Her silence was my answer. I let out a humorless laugh. Jesus, Emily, you tried to scam a scammer? She finally looked up at me. I wanted to take something from him before he could do it to someone else. Her voice was raw, desperate. I had a plan. I was never going to leave you. I was never going to let it go too far. But then you showed up, and everything fell apart. I ran a hand through my hair, exhaling sharply. You could have just told me. She shook her head. And said what? Hey, honey, I'm running a long con on a professional con man. Don't worry. About it? I clenched my jaw. And the money? Was that part of it? She hesitated again. Too long. I felt something inside me twist. I had spent years thinking I knew this woman, thinking I could trust her with anything. And now I didn't know. What was real? You were never supposed to find out, she whispered. That's not making this better, Emily. She let out a shuddering breath. I know. Silence filled the room. Then, a knock at the door. Emily froze. I turned toward it. Another knock. Emily, a voice called. Daniel. She shot to her feet, her eyes wide. You have to go. I narrowed my eyes. Why? He won't do anything now, but if he knows you're involved, he'll make sure you regret it. I let out a slow breath. And in that moment, I had a choice. I could walk away. I could leave her to deal with the mess she had made, or I could turn the game back on him. I glanced at Emily. She looked terrified, vulnerable. She had lied to me, deceived me. But maybe, just maybe, there was still something worth saving. I took a step forward, toward the door. Wait, she whispered. What are you doing? I glanced back at her. Winning. Then I opened the door and smiled. Daniel, I said, stepping aside. Come in, let's talk. I stepped aside, keeping my face neutral as Daniel walked into the room. He didn't even glance at Emily. He was completely focused on me. You're a bigger idiot than I thought, he said with a smirk, closing the door behind him. I gave you a chance to walk away, I shrugged, moving to the minibar and grabbing a small bottle of whiskey. Yeah, well, I've never been great at following orders. I twisted the cap off and took a sip, watching him carefully. Emily stood frozen, near the bed, her fingers gripping the sheets so tightly her knuckles turned white. I could feel the tension radiating off her. She was scared. Not of me. Of him. Daniel sat down on the chair near the window, leaning back like he owned the place. So, what's the plan here, husband? He smirked at me. You gonna punch me? Threaten me? Cry about your broken heart? I took another sip and tilted my head. Actually, I thought we'd talk about money. That wiped the smirk off his face. I leaned forward. See? I've been thinking about what you said earlier, about how Emily needs me. I shot a glance at her, then back at him. And I realized, you're right. Daniel blinked. Emily's breath hitched. I kept going. You were planning to use her, right? Marry her, drain her accounts, make her disappear like the others. Daniel's eyes darkened. I don't know what the hell you're talking about, I smirked. Sure you don't. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone and pressed play. His voice filled the room. She was supposed to make me fall in love with her, marry her, and then we settle finances. She makes sure she gets what she needs, and if she's lucky, she gets a payout. Daniel's face drained of color. I let the recording play a little longer, just enough to capture the essence of his confession, then stopped it. Emily's hands flew to her mouth. You... Daniel's voice was low, dangerous. You recorded me? I smiled. You talk too much. Silence. Then, slowly, Daniel stood. He took a step toward me. That recording means nothing, he said through clenched teeth. No names, no proof. You think you can take me down with that? I chuckled, tossing my phone onto the bed near Emily. Oh, I don't need to take you down, Daniel frowned. Then what the hell do you want? I turned to Emily. Tell him. She stiffened. Her eyes darted between us, panic flickering behind them. Tell him, I repeated, more forcefully. This time, she inhaled shakily. Then she straightened. I want out, she said. Daniel's head snapped toward her. What? Emily swallowed hard. I'm done. I don't need this anymore. I don't need you. His eyes narrowed. You think he's going to take you back? He let out a harsh laugh. Are you seriously that naive? I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes locked on Daniel. She's walking away, I said evenly. And you're gonna let her. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he smiled. A slow, cruel smile. You're making a mistake, he said, his voice dripping with quiet menace. Both of you. I crossed my arms. Maybe. He chuckled, shaking his head, then turned to Emily. You were never going to win, he said, his tone mocking. You really thought you could outplay me? Emily hesitated. For a second, I thought she might break. Then she surprised me. She laughed. Softly at first, then harder. Daniel's smirk faltered. You're right, she said, stepping toward him. I wasn't going to win. She glanced at me, her expression unreadable. But we just did. Daniel's fists clenched. I nodded toward the door. Get out. He hesitated like he was considering doing something stupid. Then, finally, he exhaled sharply and walked past me. Just before leaving, he paused in the doorway and looked back. This isn't over, he said. I smiled. Yeah, it is. Then I shut the door in his face. Silence filled the room. Emily let out a shaky breath and sat down on the bed, her shoulders slumping. I stayed near the door, watching her. She finally looked up. Her eyes were filled with something I couldn't quite name, guilt, relief, something else. You saved me, she whispered. I didn't respond. Because the truth was, I didn't know if I had. After a long pause, she asked, So, what now? I exhaled, running a hand through my hair. I don't know, I admitted. She nodded, like she understood. Then, cautiously, she reached for my hand. For the first time in days, I didn't pull away. Maybe we were too broken. Maybe we couldn't fix this. But in that moment, sitting in a stranger's hotel room after everything that had happened, I realized something. I still loved her. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. For now.